everybody. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to kick off the conference. I got to do the glasses on and the glasses off thing. It's great to kick off the conference with our first session, so welcome and thanks for being here on time. We're really excited to welcome you to the Produce By conference, and we're so excited for our first session, which is the Radical New Workflow, Movielabs 2030, and the Evolution of Creative Production. That's what you're all here for. So first I want to thank Fox Studio Operations for hosting us. We love being on the Fox lot. It's gorgeous. We're incredibly appreciative. So thank you to Fox Studio Operations. And I'd like to say a special thanks to our friends at HCL America Inc. for sponsoring this session. And as a courtesy to our speakers, you guys all know this, please, cell phones off. As a courtesy, we are asking for everybody who's, I know I am not doing this right at this moment because I'm speaking, I want you to be able to hear me, but we are asking everybody in the audience to keep their masks on, please. There's some, we're just trying to do that in all the indoor sessions. For the speakers, they will all be unmasked, just so you're aware. And before we get started, we're gonna show a short film from HCL America Inc., and then I'll come back and introduce our speaker and our sponsor. Thank you. So what I forgot to do is tell you who the hell I am. So this is what it means to be back in public and gathering again. You completely forget your manners. I'm Michelle Bird. I'm the Associate National Executive Director of the Guild, and I'm very pleased to welcome you. So concerned about not screwing up the intro, I forgot to tell you who I am. Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce Stephen Cohen, who's Industry Principal Media and Entertainment North America for HCL America, and he's going to provide a short intro to our session. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a small screen here. If anybody wants the video or the slides that I'm going to have, I'll have a card in the back of the room. Be happy to share that with you. Good morning, PGA members and guests. I'm thrilled to be here today and speak to you about the new opportunities that technology, specifically those by Movielabs 2030 Vision, can offer producers. One more slide. Thank you. Over the last 40 years, I've had the honor and pleasure to work in the motion picture and television content creation industry. I've addressed the needs of DPs, editors, and directors while meeting the timelines and cost restrictions of producers. Next. HCL Technologies is a solution company at heart. We help our customers solve business problems through the development and deployment of hardware, software, and custom solutions. HCL has embraced the Movielabs 2030 vision back in 2021, and we thank the 5 studios and their engineering leadership for developing their framework and suggested practices. HCL's intent is to work with the 2030 Vision documents as a foundation and build a marketplace that aligns to the production community. Imagine how a production can benefit if the Movielabs 2030 Vision is a reality. A single platform that can address over 95% of the producer's day-to-day operation. Here are the 10 key principles of Movielabs 2030 Vision and some direct benefits that producers could realize. Number 1. I know this is small, but you can get this deck, and I'm going to read these. All assets are created or ingested straight into the cloud. They do not need to be moved. Some of the benefits are media processing can happen quicker, assets are secured in the cloud, any user can be assigned access securely. Number 2, applications come to the media. Common applications are available to all global artists, pay-as-you-go applications or bring your own license. Number 3, propagation and distribution of assets is a publishing function. Distribution through cloud resources have global access. Number 4, archives are deep libraries with access policies matching speed, availability to the economics of the cloud. Reduced costs for archiving, access can be nearly instantaneous, costs for creating duplicate assets are eliminated. Number 5, preservation of digital assets includes the future means to access and edit them. Assets are available in perpetuity through secure geodiverse cloud resources. Number 6, every individual on a project is identified, verified, and their access permissions are efficiently and consistently managed. All global participants on a production have unique, secure access to content. Number 7, all media creation happens in a highly secure environment that adapts rapidly to changing threats. Piracy and leaks are nearly eliminated through secure cloud access. Number 8, individual media elements are referenced, accessed, tracked, and interrelated using a universal linking system. Duplicate files are eliminated, multiple versions are tracked, reduced errors in file sharing and remote collaboration, and current versions are clearly identified. Number 9, media workflows are non-destructive and dynamically created using common interfaces, underlying data formats, and metadata. Streamlined workflows and best practices can be reproduced and repeated across all global vendors on a production. Intelligent media with metadata enables software-defined workflow with reduced human errors. And finally, number 10, workflows are designed around real-time iteration and feedback. Workflows are agile and can respond to current and future requirements. Movielabs is encouraging technology companies and end users to utilize their tools and framework suggestions. The first step you could take is to utilize the Movielabs visual language. The visual language helps you communicate complex workflows, and the HCL Workflow Creator will enable you to articulate your intent to global participants and collaborators. This would include finding vendors on the marketplace that can deliver either single or multiple elements of your workflow, collaborating with your partners while securely moving assets into and between various cloud resources. The future we are building will enable you to focus on content and production with very little effort on technology operations. Imagine camera and sound files pushed directly to the cloud where applications create all the required deliverables for review and approval as well as editorial. The latest content creation applications are available to use globally and you only pay for what you needed. You'll be able to manage all your vendors through a single pane of glass for quotes, POs, and invoicing. You can track all budgets and expenditures across all departments. For example, the best Maya artist is in Brazil and can work on your VFX during her time zone and then hand it off to another artist in Singapore 10 hours later. Files are not moved but accessed in the cloud within a zero-trust security framework. Your VFX supervisor, executive producer, and team leaders have 100% visibility into the status of your project at all times. The sun never sets on your productions. You can review their work whenever or wherever you are. Your workflows have interoperability because of intelligent media and the automation of a software-defined framework. You are no longer locked into legacy applications and pipelines. You can swap out applications as new solutions become available during production, saving time, money, and enhancing the creative vision. Today, we're focused on building an open platform to integrate these 2030 vision principles. In the near term, through the Telecom Media and Entertainment Center of Excellence Lab in Los Angeles, we strive to achieve this integration by developing a sandbox for studios, independent production companies, and technology vendors. Our long-term goals are to provide an end-to-end cloud-agnostic platform supporting producers' requirements for content creation. We invite you to work within our labs in LA to learn more about Movielabs 2030, and we look forward to aid you in the adoption of the Movielabs 2030 vision. We've assembled a panel with producer, studio, industry, and Movielabs representatives. I'd like to introduce our panel moderator, Christina Aguilar, who will drive an interesting discussion about the Movielabs 2030 vision. And thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce the other panelists. My name is Christine Aguilera, and I'm with Amazon Studios. I'm also the president of Women in Technology Hollywood. So the first panelist, Leonard Arul, would you like to join us? And then we have Renard. Perfect. Adam. And Chris. Thank you. We are really excited to be here with you today. This is definitely a topic that we are all very passionate about. and live on a daily basis. So I think I'll go ahead and start off with a question for each of the panelists so that you can get to know them a little bit better as well. Yes, very true. Thanks for the reminder. Just so you know, if you have questions throughout, please raise your hand. We do have a mic runner around who can come so that the panelists can hear your questions and answer them throughout. We'll also reserve some time at the end for a dedicated time, but feel free to jump in and interrupt us and go any direction you want to go. Great. So basically, to get us started, as we're working towards this holistic vision, remote collaboration, a studio in the cloud, what are each of your experiences to date with the Movielabs 2030 vision? Leonard, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, thanks. It's great seeing everybody back in person, and these kinds of conferences reminds us back in the day, right? Thanks, Christina. In Microsoft side, at least we see in different changes across all the three layers, like right from the studio customers to service partners to system integrators, right? So as you look at the Movielabs vision is being split into three sections. In all the three layers, we see changes, and each means different things for a person who is consuming it. Security means something different for a cloud provider to somebody working on set on a tool. So it's like we see changes everywhere, but who is going to solve it at the top of the more consumable fashion is the challenge that we are getting to look at. But as you know, all cloud providers are invested in all the layers, and everybody wants API to talk with each other, and everybody don't want any monolithic. Everybody wants microservices. There's different changes happening, and everybody gave up on solving human errors and said, let's go ML. So that's another space it's going forward to. So we see change across all three layers, but it's a good step forward, and hope to see great changes.
I think for us on the studio side, some of the things that we're looking at is the efficiency. And we look at the fact that if we can speak a common language, if we can live within a common platform, there's an opportunity for us to be a lot more efficient. And from the production side of the world, currency for us is time. It's, if we can actually decrease the time that you spend on technology and allow you to increase the time that you spend on the creative and the production side of the world, that makes the rest of my team a lot easier to work with as we start to move things further down. So the Movielabs vision in itself has really become an industry vision. It's not just a vision for, a few folks that got in a room and kind of drew this up a few years ago. It's something that we actually believe if we can get this done and get it right, if we can start to look at things like the common language, if we can take a look at the taxonomy, and figure out how we can speak to one another across studios and across production organizations, it'll become a lot faster. So that's sort of the main thing that we're looking at right now.
Adam?
Good morning. So my story is actually a little bit interesting, just because I was part of writing, the Movielabs paper, and we were just sitting in 2019 with a whole bunch of people, and it seemed very academic. It seemed a little bit, pontificating sort of at that point because it was so out there, right? Because we were thinking this is at least 5 years, 10 years. And I remember actually being in my office somewhere in early March of 2020, and the paper had gone out, and there was a little note on my desk, and it said, look into doing something in the cloud in production this year. It was just that note. It was a goal. We're going to try to do something. And in fact, I came back to my office, a year later and found that note. And then COVID hit, right, on that, March 13th date. And suddenly, we were just thrust into a situation where every single function on our productions was down. You couldn't edit, you couldn't do visual effects, you couldn't do ADR. Every single thing, even a costume designer, right, couldn't be on set and do their job and run in and out and do changes. And so we suddenly were just thrust into doing all of those things and it wasn't ready, but it didn't matter, right? So we had to literally do all of those concepts, try 10 things in each area, do cloud editing, do ADR from home, do visual effects reviews remotely. So it all became real, and it became real like super fast, and there was no choice.
So being on the other side of everything that all of these people are doing, because I'm a producer, and was shut down. Nothing could happen. Yeah. And so after I, freaked out, we ultimately started to, and I work at Disney, we had to start thinking about how to creatively solve those problems. So in parallel, while they're writing this white paper to determine how things should be, we were using chewing gum and wire to tie things together and literally figuring out how do you do ADR at home. How do you shuttle footage that someone shot in their living room, over, and then someone's going to pick it up and they've got a mask on and they're afraid that they're spraying it down and they've got to get that. It's like, can't we just upload the footage? Well, no, because, we live in Woodland Hills and the internet goes out. So talk about needing a carrier pigeon. So I ultimately, my relationship with Movielabs is that, I work at Disney and I know Eddie Drake and Jamie Voorhees, who participated, and know all these guys, and they're our heads of technology at Marvel and Disney Studios. And they are just as passionate about solving these problems, because what they want us to do is make better movies and better shows, and they want us to stop worrying about, two-factor authorization and our token ID, and can we afford to put the content in the cloud? And instead of backing everything up on a card right out of a camera, anyway. So the idea is, can we focus on making a show? Can we focus on making a movie? So
We do have a question up at the front, and we have a mic runner coming your way. He's right here.
I'm an independent film producer, but I also direct a lot of dubs for Disney and Netflix. And during the pandemic, everything was at home. And I guess my question for you guys is, there's so many different platforms. And so I'm editing a feature that we shot in October of 2020 on Premiere. And my editor and I are trying to share screen and FaceTime and, do this. And then, I'm directing these dubs, and Zoo Dubs has you can only do 3 lines at a time. So I'm trying to get the actors to.
I don't know what are you talking about? Doesn't everything work?
So I guess my question is, when you're talking about all of the platform sharing, right, is this going to be something that incorporates all of this technology, all of these platforms? So do I only get to have a project that is edited on Avid? Is it only going to be that? Or is Premiere going to be supported? Do I only get to use ADR in terms of, Zoo Dubs? How big, how broad are you guys making this, I guess?
I'll start with all is a big word. Yeah. But I think, Renard, would you like to cover it from a studio perspective?
Yeah. I think, all is a big word. The objective is to get all of these vendors to the table. So we have monthly and quarterly forums where we bring all of these groups together to talk about how do they work better together. Part of I guess one of the tenets of the vision itself is interoperability. So whether you are working on a certain platform, the real goal is, what is the output? And making sure that that output is something that can actually speak to a larger infrastructure. So that's a huge part of what we're trying to get to. Not quite there yet. So yeah, there's still going to be a few things that are not going to work properly. And then you also have to be aware that vendors really do like their special sauce. And they want to make sure that you are on their platform and you stay on their platform. So we try and work across these groups in a way that it's non-competitive, and we actually work towards the greater good of the industry in itself. So that's what we're trying to get to. Not quite there yet, and we have a few people that we're going to have to drag along, and but over time, yes, what your vision is very in line with what we're trying to do.
We have another question in the back. Right behind you.
Hi, a bit of context here. I'm a tech serial entrepreneur, a science fiction writer, and a film producer, and I've been doing those three things at the same time throughout my life. So I guess it's very interesting to hear this future. And I was just wondering, right, like in a climate like now when NASDAQ drops 80% and new tech companies are really difficult to be founded, these problems don't really seem that, I mean, of course, it's very complicated, but that complicated for disruptive startup to just build. But I think, for example, it would be really hard to get funding because this is a very niche of a market. My question, I guess, is what kind of, is there any accelerators, or any sort of a supportive environment for more of a tech entrepreneur minds to come into this space and try to be a part of helping to solve the problem?
Accelerators in regards to the issues, or accelerators in regards to file transfers?
Everything. So, like, how can entrepreneurs help solve this is kind of my question.
Yeah.
So I commented on that earlier. So HCL is building a lab here in LA, the HCL TME Center of Excellence. You could see me in the back of the room, and we're looking to bring independent producers and technologists and things to the table to build a sandbox to solve these problems. It's not in a vacuum. We all have to participate.
Perfect, exactly. Because ultimately, in order for us to end up with an ideal end result that works for everybody, the folks that are building towards those solutions need to work with each of you. Is there any other additions, Chris?
From an internal company perspective, there's another challenge that isn't just solving the technical so it's people and their fear and their reticence to embrace things like this. So it's not just trade secrets or working with your competitor, Avid working, with Adobe or whatever the technology may be. There are systems and templates and business templates in place that take a lot of lawyers, lots of time to do some stuff, and they're doing other stuff. So I think there's another layer to this, which is championing this idea, which is why all of you are so important, which is to take this idea and to go read Movielabs principles and to champion it yourselves, because it's common sense. It's a white paper on what we should be doing instead of not be doing. Because, I mean, honestly, the things that have evolved most radically have just been storage, data storage. But how you get that stuff to everyone requires all of these other things like franchise managers and canon keepers and producers to really care about this, to say, I'm not going to do this unless this happens. That kind of pressure is really critical. So in addition to, the lab and to all these people pushing, it's going to take people who make content to be loud.
Now, I want to throw in a question, because ultimately we are all here because we want to learn something from each other. So just to take a moment to get real, and just so you know, we do have some questions coming up here as well. Reality is that it's not easy. And where we're at right now and where we have to go, there's a lot of things that need to change. But Chris, from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest challenge that the producers have in front of them in regards to getting to these cloud workflows?
I break it into two camps. The first is the producers who are on overall deals with studios. Their reality is very different from an independent. The independent producer's concern is cost. Can they even afford, to put everything up into the cloud right now, or whatever the infrastructure is going to cost? And I mean, look, render time even, which is something that we talk about in the principles, is, can be 30% of a budget of a movie. Render time. So that's a cost too. So everything has a cost in order to compute it, to store it, to move it, to sync it, to authorize it. For the studio producers, it's what systems am I going to be forced to use? So I think those are the biggest concerns that I have, and those are gates. One is a financial gate, and the other is maybe a gate about freedom or creative choice. Ultimately, though, I think everyone still has to be flexible. So in the solutions that are going to come out from Movielabs and for everyone working towards this goal and from the lab, is there can't just be one solution to every problem. There has to be consideration for the independent producer, for the studio producer, for anybody that's working, for even me. So I'm a producer that works inside the company in creative marketing on the studio side. It's hyper-specific. And I use all kinds of systems in the company and outside the company, and in particular, with I think the third leg of that table is vendors. I mean, vendors really kind of dictate most of my world. Those are the people that do my work. So those producers, and they use what they use because they already have licenses that they paid for, and they've got someone in their business affairs department saying, "You can't buy something else. We paid for this." So I think that's everyone is picking a date maybe in the future and saying, let's work towards it, which is what Movielabs is trying to do, is to say, let's all kind of go towards this direction.
We have a question up here in the front. You walked right past her.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nada Albright. I work with Red Digital Cinema. I work with filmmakers. And last week, I was talking to probably one of the top 5, well-known cinematographers in the world. And we were just talking about his next project and how we could help him. He always shoots on full frame 8K. And he said, well, I just talked to the line producer. We have a little, bump in the road. They wanted to know why I was shooting full frame. Yeah. And I said, that's really, you still encounter that. So my question to you is, what kind of relationship, what can a company like Red, who's been, on the forefront of digital acquisition, what about capture? What kind of conversations do you have? And, we work with, Amazon. We just had a meeting. We work with post-production as much as we can. But it's that gray area where they're put under pressure. They're maestros, And why are they asked those questions when it has nothing to do with, as you well know, it doesn't, it's compressed and it's actually less than 444. So you get all those 4K, 6K, 8K questions. I think you understand my question, though.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I mean that's old school thinking, right? That's
We fight that a lot.
not wanting to shoot in a way which, well, you could have ultimate flexibility in your post workflow. You could frame the shot any way you want. You could punch in, you could punch out. You can even do anamorphic if you want and apply some filters and make it look like you shot with a certain lens. Or you could not do that, and you could, paint yourself into a corner and just do what your creative vision has only told you must do. It's a lack of training. I mean, I don't know how much of this is feeding into the schools, but I mean, you got to tell people that aren't the cinematographers who get exposed to this stuff. It's the line producer who's panicking because they're in charge of money and time. So I think it's educating everyone on if you have more flexibility, everything else is fluid. So you can make up for things in other areas, but people think very linearly, and I think it's changing that.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem, because I experienced this a lot at the studio, and even now that I'm doing a lot of work with the tech vendors right on that side, is that your production departments and budgets are all siloed, right? So you've got a camera department budget, you've got a visual effects budget, a post, and each person fought to get a certain amount of money in their budget. And then you have these technologies and process changes where one person could make some change and it'd save a ton of money downstream in all the other areas, but it cost a little bit more in that camera area, or it cost a little bit more somewhere else. And you can't do it because of the politics of how the budgeting is done. You know, you often don't have this process of looking at sort of the ROI or the savings across the entire workflow, because at that point everything, you know, is set, right? Because like in your example, you're going to spend more money shooting an 8K. You're going to have more media you're having to store, more media you're having to move, all that's going to increase costs. But then downstream, you're going to have more options, more flexibility. You might have less reshoots because you've, you know, captured more. But it's being able to holistically look at, you know, the budget across the entire workflow and make those trade-offs.
That's the head of production, right, at on the studio side. So that's the person that's in charge of looking at all of the budgets and saying, all right, well, I need to go work with business affairs now and tell them that it's okay, we're going to amortize these costs across the next 6 shows or the next 3 movies that we're going to do, and we can build that into their budget and call it out as a line item and say, it's okay, you can spend that because we have to do that in order for all these movies or shows to move together to get to the place that we need to.
And we have 2 questions on this side, one in the back of the room and one in the front. And thank you, by the way, these are great questions.
Hello, Chris mentioned something about independent producers being concerned about cost for the platform, and I wanted to know, for independent producers, is there an idea of what it would cost to adapt a technology like this when it's ready?
Stephen, is that something that HCL can lend some thoughts on?
We don't have numbers on cost yet because this is still a moving target, but it's a crawl, walk, run strategy. You can start small. You can start with a small department and take the benefits of cloud with that department. You could expand it as necessary. So this is, Movielabs says it's Movielabs 2030, so they thought it was a 10-year project. We think this is a 3 to 5 year project. So if you come and be part of our labs, we can help you develop some of the solutions in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years. And we plan to work with all the studios and vendors and things like that to put this vision, you know, in a timeline.
Thanks, Stephen.
Another thing that I would say is that you have to make sure that when you're looking at cost, that you are looking across all things. Don't just associate costs with the money itself. You have to look at, is there a way for me actually to expand what I'm doing in one area in order to save in another area? That's a much more realistic way to look at it right now. Because if you get bogged down into the financials and you're only looking at, okay, I've got to make sure that I don't go above this, you often put yourself in a position where you begin to take away from your creative vision, and you start sort of putting a bit of a handcuff on your creativity. So think about it a little bit broadly, and then make the, you know, sort of the pulls and the pushes where you need to within that budget that you have.
I think the reality is that costs in some areas will go up. But can we talk about maybe some of those areas where costs could potentially go down by enabling remote collaborations with cloud workflows?
I will say that my years of being in this industry, I never talk about costs going down because I have to deal with CFOs. I have to deal with CFOs every single day, and I never do that. So what I will say is that we are looking at a more efficient way of doing our job and doing the job, you know, for the producers. But the real goal, in all seriousness, the real goal is that technology should never be a hindrance. It should always be a help. That's what it's supposed to do.
So I'll give you an example of how it may be a wash at the end of the day. So Archival Materials, which is another part of the principles and what everything is looking at. So if I can take full frame raw footage, put it into a library, and then access it 8 years later for a sequel, and go in and modify that content. But I don't have to go track that asset down. I don't have to go to the film library. I don't have to, if I can just, you know, fill out a form and get access to it to start working with it, that has saved an incredible amount of time and money and time. And frustration. But cost is going to go up because the more convenient it is to use that asset and reuse it, I got to pay royalty costs. So it's kind of a wash because I got to pay everybody that worked on that original asset. If it's so available and I can use it, I might.
You mean you don't have to go to that pallet of servers in the storage unit somewhere?
The nightmare that is, yes.
Leonard, go ahead.
Yeah, this is great discussion. So if we unpack it based on the cost, if you look at it, like everybody talked about, it looks like the cost depends, time, dollars, and so on. And it comes as like vision, championing it, and then standardizing. Once you stand it, then a lot of people consume it, then the cost goes down. So there's a lot of layers you attack before you actually get the cost out. And a lot of today's YouTubers, TikTokers are looking at speed to market. They want to get their videos out first, right? Like get their concept out first. And that actually creates a certain kind of cost variant.
So to that point, I have a quick question for all of you. Not in cost, but in benefit, reward for a 2030 vision if it comes to pass in 2030. Was there discussion about when you would see traction and friction go away and people really start to see the benefit, even the reduction of fear of working with technology? I mean, was it 5 years past the time that this all starts to operate?
I think COVID has helped reduce fear because it kind of forced people over that hurdle a bit. But Adam, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we had originally, I think, probably envisioned 3-4 years, right? You'd start seeing some traction, but it wouldn't become just sort of part of the normal, this is the way we always operate by default. We have no fear, everything is going to work. Even like concepts like camera to cloud, right? Camera to cloud sounds really great, but it's really scary, I think, to be on set and thinking, oh my God, like all this media as fast as I'm shooting has to get there. It has to get there every day, has to get there really fast.
No one's touching my camera cards.
Right? Yeah.
No one.
Yeah. And some DPs are even afraid of having a transmitting device right on that camera, a 5G, a Wi-Fi, because they don't want to.
It's going to send it right to the pirates, and who are going to take the data.
But in terms of, I think even, I'm tying this back now to the cost savings. I mean, one of the cost savings I see, although I know every time there's a cost savings, the line producer or someone else takes it back and uses the money somewhere else. Is sort of the concept of back to set, right? Meaning that if I can shoot and I can get immediate dailies, I can then hand that off to an editor in the cloud who can do a quick cut. I can do a quick pull, hand that to the visual effects vendor who can do a post-viz, add that to the editorial, get it back to set while you're still shooting in that same scene or setup. You actually could avoid reshoots, right? You could avoid a lot of cleaning up, a lot of fixes in post because you actually can get it right either on set, or you can see that you've actually captured what you need and you can save a half day or a day of shooting, because you don't have to overshoot, right, just in case. So there are things where you can kind of be smarter, get more feedback, and get a rough sort of cut with some post-viz in there while you're on set that actually could save money during production. And so many shows end up spending a lot of money in posts that wasn't budgeted on reshoots, rework, getting vendors to work overtime, right, because you are redoing things. So the more you can get it right on set, the more you can actually save a lot of money later on.
Thank you. We have a question right here in the front, and then we have 2 questions over here in the front.
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. I grew up in post-production film lab and then worked at 4MC, Ascent Media, Liberty Media, then launched an asset management system. So it sounds a little bit like the Holy Grail. And seeing the panelists up here, it's really unique because you've got studios and tech companies involved. And I've been hearing quite a bit about the, I think Deluxe coined the first phrase, script to screen. So it sounds like we're moving towards this Holy Grail of bringing everybody together to launch this. And Chris, you've said some things where it's kind of a future stated. with you guys being up here representing and behind Movielabs, is this your guys' commitment to put this forward, and then through producers, independent and studios, are we looking at a user interface platform where you guys will adopt it from the studios, but as independent, we're going to be paying a price to access this? I'm sure we'll hear more, Chris, from the literature you're getting, but I know there's a couple of other entities racing towards doing this. And it seems like Moore's Law addresses it. It'll probably come sooner than we think. But is the idea that when you guys are sitting up here, you're adopting this particular technology to move it forward? Is that the statement?
No. The idea is that we're putting these principles out in the industry, and the hope is that we bring all of these groups together to have a common platform. We're working right now on a common language. That's the first step. If we can all say that let's all call a rap drive, okay? And let's understand what that means. And it means the same thing across all of the industry. Right now, if I'm on the Fox studio lot today, they speak a different language than we do over at Warner Brothers, even though we're saying the same thing. If we can get to the point where we have more interoperability across a common platform, and we can get vendors to actually adopt that, then it doesn't really matter, who or what tools you're using. That's really what we're trying to get to. That's the real holy grail. Now, just because I have the gray beard, you want to go and start talking about PAL? The truth of it is that we don't want to go down that particular road. I mean, look, full disclosure, I am the executive vice president of SMPTE as well. And so, so see, he opened the door. I didn't do it. He did it. I wasn't going to mention this. But the key to that is that standards are still important. And a lot of people don't realize that standards have sort of been democratized. And there are a lot of open standards that are out there that are not really standards. They are really someone's secret sauce that they put out there and they want you to adopt. That's okay if you can do it within a confined area. What we are looking to do is to incorporate standards as a part of a common platform and then get us all speaking the same language. If we get all these things working together, that's the real vision. That way, I'm not going to say you don't have to worry, but you can worry a little less about what tools you're using to get to that end game.
Leonard, did you also want to add something?
No, I think Renard covered most of the part I was trying to say.
I'd like to address that specific question. So, All Access Media Marketplace is one part of the industry's example of adopting Movielabs 2030 vision. We're partnered with Microsoft and CoreSite to help bring this vision to market. There we envision minimal cost to producers to use the platform, and we're encouraging people to use the platform now for this visual language tool to help you articulate how you're going to build these workflows in the future. The burden of the cost will be absorbed by the vendors who provide the services. Simple as that.
Now I remember what I was trying to say. It's all about the who, what, and how, right? So we know now who, everybody, we have to be part of this change to make the change happen. And then what we are going to do is set on the standards. How is the big question that you're asking, right? That's the key. So, but the how has to come from who is responsible, and everybody has to change. So setting everybody following the standards, talking the common language, as Renard said, will help to build that platform together, not just somebody building on their own and they will die out in 5 years. When they go even to the next version, that version is going to die out. So it has to be into a common standard, like TAR. Everybody uses TAR. When was it built? Years ago, and it's a common standard. Everybody followed. We are still using it. There are a lot of downsides to it. I agree. I hated TAR too, but still, if you tar something in 1978, you can still get it back, right? So those are advantages that we should adopt, and we should be part of the change. Change for human beings is difficult, unless you're part of the change, you won't accept the change, and I think we should be part of that.
And it is nice that we're all working together towards that single vision and goal.
Just like one more thing to add to that, you know, I spent 19 years at Warner Brothers on the studio side, right?
And then you left me.
And then I left it, right? But you know, I have that perspective, right, as sort of the buyer and dealing with, you know, hundreds of technology vendors. And now I've spent the last year and a half actually consulting to multiple technology vendors, a lot of which are startups that are all kind of struggling to like do things in this area. And one of the things, you know, that becomes clear is that no one vendor, right, will or can do all of this. And these workflows are very complicated, right? They have a lot of parts to it. We have the snowflake nature of production, which means even if you came up with a set of technologies together, they'd work on one type of production or even one production with a certain set of preferences from those filmmakers, but the same exact movie with different filmmakers with different preferences, those technologies wouldn't work. So there's a lot of, I mean, you know, there's a lot of risk, right, for an individual vendor to try to do the whole thing. And so many of them, right, are doing all these different parts. The vendors really have to have a lot of partnerships in place, right? Have to look at all of the other capabilities that are upstream and downstream from them that together create the workflow that's needed, and then create the partnerships, right, with all of those other tech vendors so that every time a different situation comes up, they can create a configuration, a portfolio of tech that solves that problem. Where the Movielabs and even what the studios are doing helps is to provide some framework for how the tech vendors come together. And I think one of the most challenging parts is sort of what does that interchange layer in the middle look like? Because almost nobody wants to build or be the interchange. Everybody wants to be the digital asset management system, the visual effects shot tracking system. You know, they all want to be those things. So that layer in between of how it's all connected, you know, and that's part of actually, you know, what the TCL product is. But just figuring out, and the studios helping to kind of define that in a way that technology vendors can make money. Because at the end of the day, every technology vendor who's going after this has to make money or they're not going to be in the game.
Yeah, and then you know, you talk about the transactional layer. That's what Adam's really talking about. That piece has not been figured out yet. That is a piece that probably will take us until 2030 to really get that right. Because once again, you know, it's like the Tower of Babel. We have a ton of different languages, ton of different things that are coming in, feeding into this. But we have to get that transactional layer right for this vision to really come to fruition.
James, do you still have a question? In the front row here.
James Ganir, director, producer. The year of 2020 was an interesting year. It ended up being really productive for us, and did a couple films. We ended up doing what Adam was talking about, where we were uploading cards, and that was really interesting, trying to get internet connection in some of these places, as Chris was saying. And we're able to do edits and have stuff, and it has saved us a lot of time. I didn't have to do reshoots later on because we found out what was missing, what we needed, and we just scheduled an extra day at the end of the shoot on there, which was tremendously helpful. My question comes more as we were kind of forced into doing more of this digital and cloud on there. When we were delivering one of them to Amazon, and we were going through like the ingestion lab and that, is there anything in place to make sure that in these transfers that it's not creating or injecting artifacts into the files? I had perfect files, and artifacts were appearing, and so it's like we were finally said, screw this, can we just deliver a drive? And we ended up doing that, and we've always been doing that. Drives just, you know, being sent across town and all that. With all of this kind of babble and going on, how do we make sure that the integrity of the files aren't altered? That is the biggest concern for me as a creative as well as a producer, because both of those are just massive costs in time and money to make sure that those files, and the fear sleeping at night, are my files okay, or are they going to be corrupted, and how do I get them back to where they're not corrupted?
Quality is huge.
Camera cards.
I defer. I have to defer to Leonard on that because he's the cloud provider.
So I don't think it's a technology problem. The technology does exist to check an integrity of the file and all those things. It's more of a human I don't want to call it as an error, but missing a step, right? I know it happens, and I know engineers who just open up a whole VM to the cloud because they don't know what port to open for remote desktop, and they just get hacked. But that doesn't mean cloud is not secure. It's the misstep of the person working through the process. But as I said, the technology exists, but how much we consume the technology is the question. Or there's an MD5, there is an 8-bit checks, there's a bunch of places which can also help you with the time. Am I sending 20,000 files or 20 million files? And can I do it linear? Can I do it parallel? I can do burst, like rendering. It's exact same problem you face in rendering. Instead of putting on one core on a one file, you can chunk the file into 20 millions and throw it against 20 million cores. Cost is going to change, that's always there. But I can guarantee the technology exists for checking the integrity and making sure everything is same. And all these things should be adopted by the user too. But on a technology front, I can say it exists.
I think it can also fall on the technologists to ensure that we're putting tools out there that aren't too techy.
That's true. I agree that. Easy button.
Because ultimately the tools are being leveraged by the creatives, not engineers. So I think there is a responsibility and an onus on the technologists to make sure that we're building the tools and with the right experience.
I completely agree to that one. And then there's, again, as I said, the remote desktop thing that years back, I know an engineer opening it up. Both of us, the engineering side and the cloud framework side, both of us improved, right? Now you go spin up a VM, it asks you, or you want SSH or open an RDP. So you can pick and choose. Now it's a click button rather than you to remember what kind of technology goes on, how it should be used. So it's a mutual growth.
Totally. So we do have only about 5 minutes left, and I see at least 4 hands up on this side and a couple more on this side. So if we can capture the questions in the 2 front rows here, and then we'll move around.
Hi, I'm Sarah Katz. I'm an archival producer with a boutique kind of independent production company in New York. And I manage media all day, every day. And I'm really excited about this platform and the metadata and all that. I'm curious what you think about internet bandwidth overall. I work with teams in Egypt and South Africa, and we have producers in France and all over the world. So I'm just curious because it seems universal bandwidth. It will be really instrumental for this.
I have an answer to that. Just dealing with productions that always used to move into facilities, right? And they would take whatever was the lowest bandwidth available because it came free with renting the stages. It was usually like 50 megabits or whatever. And then later on, you're fighting, right, to try to get more because you actually discover, right, that you need more. When we started the Black Adam movie, right, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, actually, and I knew that a lot of it was going to be in the cloud. It was huge, When we were talking to the facility where they were going to shoot, and they said, "How much bandwidth do you need?" And I just said, "How much do you have?" Because really, the answer is as much as you can possibly get. If somebody will give you, a 50 gigabit connection to the cloud, you will be able to use it. And you will move faster, and you will have less problems. And what I really figured out is that spending more money for more internet bandwidth or even network bandwidth on set is such a leverage point, and it's worth it, right? I mean, you spend an extra, whatever it is, $10,000, $100,000, it will make everybody's life easier because every single thing in that production workflow will move faster. You know, and if someone says you have a choice of 2 gig or 5 gig, I would take 5. I would take 10. I mean, if somebody will pay for it, because it's just going to save you a lot of grief, and everything is just going to move faster.
It's just a whack-a-mole, right? It's compute, storage, and network. It's whack-a-mole. Whatever you hit, the other two comes out. You know, first, it's storage. You hit it. Oh, we got a lot of storage. Now you have, where's the compute? You hit the compute with the cloud. Now you have the network. It's like, what are we going to go faster? When you hit the network, the other two is going to come out again.
Whack-a-mole's a good analogy. Go ahead in the front row.
Hi, my name is Kia Kiso. I'm an independent producer, but right now I'm an in-house kitty, kind of like a golden handcuffs at Pareto Labs, and we do business education videos. And I wish this was out yesterday. You know, I couldn't even send an email because my assistant editor was uploading something to Box. It was impossible. And I'm wondering, and we make the equivalent maybe like 14 features within a year, like we're creating a lot of content. Is there a project management solution also incorporated in this where I can continue, like in Asana, for example, where I can continue to communicate with my team and do a Gantt chart and deliver, you know, due dates and so forth that talks to this whole system, or else this is great for them, but then I'm still on the outside looking in, trying to communicate about what's going on inside.
That's where the partnership with the vendors is key and critical. So I think it needs to be the full pipeline from my perspective, but would any others like to add on to that?
I was just going to say that there's various pipeline management tools, right? You know, whether it's something like a shock grid, F-track, you know, and it just depends on what you're trying to actually, you know, keep in coordination, right? Are you trying to keep in sync all the steps in the, you know, media creation, right? You know, from concept art all the way to visual effects and final delivery, or are you talking about sort of managing the project of the people and coordinating schedules and work and all that? Because those tend to be sort of different systems and different layers in terms of tools.
Yeah, I was also going to say the way that you set up your infrastructure plays a big role in that as well. Your production group should have its own space. You should have sort of a production net, and that place is where a lot of that heavy lifting is done. And then you should have, you know, I don't like to use the term enterprise, but you should have a back office you know, sort of set up so that those tools can work independently of the other ones. That way you can actually be in the same space, but you're air-gapped between each other. So when your editor is putting, you know, large files, and by the way, files are going to get larger as we continue to go for higher resolution. When they're doing that, they're not affecting what you're actually doing and what the rest of the group is doing too. So that's another way to look at solving that issue.
Well, it would be I would hope that part of the lab and part of the exploration in finding the solution for this active layer would be air traffic control for data, because data is going to increase exponentially, and that's cost. So if you can put certain variables in and have it looking at, you know, your bandwidth and all of the systems that all of the vendors and all the software is using, so that it knows when to throttle what when, or send you a warning and say in your schedule, you're going to be down over here, or you're going to slow down for about a half an hour while this is rendering, or while this is going on, or while this is uploading. Just some sort of smart, because otherwise you're going to have everyone constantly in a war room talking about, well, I need that. You can't have that, I can't have that. Otherwise, you are going to have to do that, which is isolate everybody.
Yeah, and the good thing about what we're actually doing with Movielabs is that when you start to move a lot of this stuff to the cloud, the ability to expand the amount of bandwidth and the amount of processing that you have grows exponentially, because the cloud, I'm not going to say that it's infinitely, you know, but it can grow at a much faster and larger rate than what you could do internally. So if you're looking at an internal network and that's what you're working on, you're probably going to be gated at some point. As long as there is a database, you know, a data center out there somewhere that Microsoft has access to all over the world, because they have, you know, they have these centers all over the world, they can continue, as long as you're willing to pay for it, they can continue to expand your ability to process at a much faster rate. So that's a part of what is, you know, in the vision for Movielabs as well. And it gets back to what Chris is talking about, which is essentially the old school way of thinking about, you know, a media manager.
These have been a lot of great questions. In all your registration bags, there's a blue card for All Access Media Marketplace that has our contact information. We have a booth outside of the Zanuck Theater that's going to be available today and tomorrow, and I'll be in the back of the room after we finish to give out cards or set up meetings. Bye-bye.
So with that being said, we are out of time. There were still a couple questions left. I wanted to thank Stephen for pulling this group together, and also thank Leonard, Renard, Adam, and Chris. It's been fun. Thanks.